Hi guys, welcome back to Let's Talk with Brian and Tia. We're really excited about another episode this Friday. We are going to be talking about in-laws and what roles they play in our life once we all decide to go ahead and get married and how that affects us. So let's talk about it.
In-laws are sometimes tough to interact with and deal with depending on your situation. I think it's one of those things where it either is really, really good or it's really, really bad. Or at least that's been my experience. And so speaking of that, do you think that you should have to pick a side when it comes to in-laws? Is it like my spouse or my mom and dad? Or my brothers and sisters or my family?
Pick a side for like when it's a confrontation?
Just in general, right? Like, because there are so many things that come up when you decide to merge families, right? Like holidays or whether there's a disagreement or if your spouse or your in-laws just don't like each other.
Yeah, I mean that's really tough because I believe that when you get married, your spouse is first. You know what I mean? Your husband is first or your wife is first. Because you guys live together and you guys have to make sure you are communicating and get on the same page with things. But although that's something that should be first, I do think it's a little unfair for people to, assume that, you'll fall into that role immediately because you have to think about it. Your family, your mom, your sisters, your brothers, you've lived with them your whole life. You've done so many things. You've considered everything in most traditional spaces, you consider everything of their opinion first. So it takes a while to be able to transition to now you have someone new in your life who you have to consider, and it's more of an emotional thing, I think, to detach. And now you have to think about, I don't want to hurt my mom's feelings or my dad's feelings or my sister's feelings because you have built these strong relationships with them throughout the years. So sometimes it can be a little bit of an emotional roller coaster when you have to start kind of severing ties and kind of telling them like, okay, you have to take the back seat and this is what I have to go with first. This is what me and Brian think. And sometimes people just get offended because they're emotional.
Facts. Yeah, no, I think that is tough. And I heard the first part of what you said was like you believe that your spouse comes first. I think that ultimately boils down to a person's beliefs, and that sounds like, it's more tied to, maybe not for you, but tied to some people's religious beliefs, or just their beliefs in general. But I think the other side of that is for another person who maybe didn't have the same type of relationship with their family. For them, it may not be as simple as, or for them, they may not see it as a difficult task to be able to detach
yes,
from their family or their family's decisions and what they think. And so I think that ultimately can create somewhat of a rift between spouse and family, simply because for one person they can see it as a tough decision, the other person can see it as, it's simple, like, just do what you think you should do best for yourself and your relationship versus considering what your spouse thinks. Now, so I think it can be tough, especially if the dynamics were different, which they were for us.
Right, they were very different for us.
How much of your parents' opinion do you think it matters? And I know it kind of ties back into what you said, like depends on how close you are with your family. But how much should your parents' opinion matter in regards to your relationship? If they observe things, I know my mom always got something to say, but how much that their opinion matters?
Yeah, that's a tough one because at first, before I had children, I didn't realize how much my mom's opinion should have mattered in my relationship. You know what I mean? I think now that I have children, I don't feel like I would need to insert myself and like feel like my opinion is number one, but I would definitely want them to heavily consider my suggestions in their relationship. Now that I'm a parent, I can kind of understand my mother's concern at certain points, right. and I would wanting to lend the ear a little bit more.
Yeah, I actually just had this conversation with my dad a couple days ago. I think it ultimately is surrounded with boundaries, and I think as a parent you have to understand what your boundaries are, right? So if you do give your opinion or your child does value your opinion, I think you also have to take into consideration the boundaries and what what things that they can learn on their own without you always giving your opinion. Because sometimes your opinion is just your opinion. It's
and
not.
I think delivery is important. Not to cut you off,
No,
but
yeah.
delivery is very important. You know, if you're coming from an emotional, angry, space as a parent, you're not going to be received very well. You
Right.
know, and not to say that if you come from a loving, calm space that you're necessarily going to be received immediately, but I think that it will allow the child to listen a little bit more versus if it's just like, I'm telling you what to do. Because children their whole lives they dream to become adults and make their own decisions.
Right.
So when they grow up and they feel like they're making their own decisions, to kind of come at them with like an iron fist I think is counterproductive.
It's definitely counterproductive.
Yeah.
But also going back to the idea of opinion, like there's a difference between your opinion, what you think of a certain situation, or what you think of your children's spouse or partner, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And then there's a difference between giving advice and sharing your experiences. And I think that plays a huge role in regards to how your children respond to the information that you give them. And I know that's something I plan to be very mindful of, not just giving my opinion. Who cares what I think about
Right. It's
your
just
boyfriend
like
or your girlfriend?
real solutions and like
Yeah.
kind of coming up with like, okay, critical thinking. What do you think about this? Or is that
Exactly.
okay for you to take that type of behavior or so.
Right.
So
Or putting it back on them and reminding them about the things that they learned. You've learned this in this situation, how'd that play out?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think opinion is one of those things you have to tread lightly on, giving your opinion as opposed to, actually sharing advice or experience. So in regards to how much of it matters, I don't think your parents' opinion matters very much in regards to, the relationship and them being the in-laws, because everybody has an opinion.
yeah, that's
mean?
very true.
I think another dynamic that is kind of hard, sometimes you get past the parental, right? You get your parents on the same page or the in-laws on the same page, like, they accept you but then you have that next family dynamic of siblings that sometimes they don't always take to your spouse initially.
Yeah. I think siblings, sometimes can be really similar to parents. I think it's like being used to being first. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you with your siblings all the time, you guys are hanging out, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't go because, my boyfriend, or, oh, I can't, well, now being married, but I can't go because, my husband is, or every time you guys go somewhere they want to bring them to, it's like, Jesus Christ, like, can we just hang out? That can be annoying. So, I think it's just the idea of like, sometimes family feels like a possessiveness, what I mean, or ownership. And so, sister-in-laws and brothers-in-law, sometimes they feel like, we used to hang out every weekend and do this, and now you're like always, I can't because I'm married, or I can't because I have to hang out with my wife or do something,
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to boundaries and also being mindful of the transition, right? If you create boundaries between your families, letting them understand that, this time is for my family, this time is for my spouse. I think sometimes you have to separate it that way. And not only boundaries with your siblings or your family, but boundaries with your spouse.
Yeah.
Me and my sister chill every Friday, so I'm sorry, you can't come this week. You know what I mean? So it's okay to also
spouses being aware and considerate of that as well.
Exactly.
Because that's not fair to feel to make the other person by that to completely cut off what they're used to doing with their family for so long.
Big facts. And I think ultimately it comes down to an adjustment period, like Tia mentioned in the beginning. Like, it's not something that happens off the bat. Everybody has to adjust to a new person being involved in the family, a new person being involved in life. And so there's a time period that you have to just wait kind of until it smooths over. The sucky part is when you have that sibling that's always bringing somebody new around. It's like, yo, son, you just brought somebody 3 months ago. Like, I'm not about to keep doing all this adjusting to all these new people. And so I think it makes it tough when you're doing that. But ultimately, creating the boundaries, I think, even helps with that, right?
Yeah,
like,
I do.
We're going to adjust to him, but it's not a priority, you know what I mean, when you have somebody bringing them in frequently. I know holidays is really big for you, and it has always been big for you. Do you feel like it was a challenge for you splitting time between in-laws or family?
No.
Or see how that can be a challenge to some people who
I could definitely see
where two people have families that holidays
yes.
are big.
So I think for me, I guess me and your dynamic is a little different because you weren't very big on your holidays, and you weren't as close with your family, or you aren't as close to your family.
Right.
So it was like more of a natural thing where I just kind of took it over, and it was just like, okay, my family, because
Right.
my family is very big on holidays, and we're very big on getting, getting together, and that's really something that's important to us. So for me, it was kind of like, a breeze, but I know I can only imagine, that would be fun to talk about on the live. I mean, people can talk about how do you, split up time between your families, because, we would, because we used to, right now your siblings don't live in California with us, but they used to come and spend
Right,
Christmas with
right.
us and things like that. And now that they're not here, it's, it's obviously just you and us, you know what I mean? And so I think, I don't know, how was that for you?
I never really put a lot of thought into it, and mostly because I think I enjoy the congregation of like bringing family together, being there together. And as a child, we would definitely do things during the holidays. I don't remember it being as big, but we definitely did things during the holidays. But I guess just with the dynamic switching with my family and us not being as interactive as in the past when I was a kid, when you really don't have a choice, right? You become an adult,
Yeah.
you're like, I don't really mess with my family
Right.
like that. But, when that dynamic shifted, I think it just felt more comfortable to do things with you and then just invite my family or relatives that were comfortable with our relationship dynamic and were okay with integrating with your family. So my
Right.
cousin and my brother and sister, when they were here, we would just integrate with your family, and it just was easier to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's so funny now. I just see, my in-laws as, with, your cousin and his wife now. It's like those are like
That's family.
family.
Yeah.
And it's like that's where we've adapted to mostly. So when I think of, your family, that's who I think of first or only,
Right.
And obviously, your brother and sister, because we were so close at one point, and, they're not in state, but now that you have in state your cousin, that's just like our family, and we integrated, and it's just like we do our yearly trip, and it's just like, it's family now,
Right.
don't feel like in-laws,
Definitely. And I think you sometimes have to just allow it to make shift into whatever it goes into. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't control what the family dynamic is always going to look like.
Yeah.
But I think you ultimately just learn to adapt to it.
Right.
You have to adapt to it. So we kind of covered this a little bit in regards to like, the opinions of your parents. But I know for people that are really close to their parents, sometimes when it comes to like, important decisions in their lives or decisions that they feel like they have to make, that's going to affect certain things, they go to their parents for those decisions. What about the dynamic of if your spouse feels like, why you always go to your parents for
Right.
your decision making or things like that?
I think that is something that it for me, it crosses over with age. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, like, when you're younger, I think that that's okay. You know what I mean? Because you're just getting out into the world, and you should go to your parents, for guidance and help. Because if you have that relationship and you're able to, I think after a while you should consider your spouse's, feelings. When you become married and you guys are older together, you should think about kind of having that conversation with your spouse first, and then saying, is it okay if I kind of get the opinion of my mom or my father as well, because they're really well versed in this, or they kind of know me better, and or I don't know if you should say that, but they kind of maybe could help guide me, or I will feel more comfortable if I talk to my mom about this too. So I think that is probably something that you should consider. Like, I think you should probably talk to your spouse first and ask them if it's okay to ask your parents.
So I definitely think it should be communicated. I don't know about asking, and I had to grow to that place. And the reason why I say that is because I think if that's something that they've, one, always done, but two, it's important to them to do, I don't think that it's a situation in which your spouse should have a choice in it.
Oh,
and whether or not you do that, right? If you ask, they might say, "Nah, don't do that." You know what I mean?
well, only reason why I say ask or maybe share with the spouse first, because what if the spouse doesn't want to share that information yet?
Right.
Like,
So-
what if you guys are thinking about like buying a house
or having a kid.
or having a child, right?
Right.
And so you say, well, let's hold off. If I say, oh, I really want to talk to mom about this. Yeah, but I'm not 100% solid on this decision yet, or I'm not sure if I want to share that information yet. Maybe we can hold off on telling your mom.
Gotcha. Definitely.
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that there is a balance with it. But like I said, for the other side, I can also see where, again, you may just be sharing with them, but they don't get to have a say-so.
Yes.
It's more of just you sharing, right?
Yeah.
I like to talk to my mom about things that I'm thinking about. Your mom may give their thoughts or their ideas or their experiences, but it has no merit in regards to the decision that you make with your spouse.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think it could be both.
Mm-hmm.
It can definitely be both. There are situations where that should happen the way that we kind of talked about, but it doesn't happen that way because your spouse is sometimes too attached to the
parent. Yeah, that's a tough
and
one.
I think that sometimes becomes a tough dynamic to deal with when you have one spouse that's just, yo, do you have to talk to your mom about every single thing?
Yeah, I don't think that that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think that it crosses a boundary because it
Right.
allows, I think it's just like with anything, with in-laws, siblings, and friends. I think when you share too much of your relationship with the outside world, whether you want it or not, they feel like they have an opinion on everything. They begin to insert themselves. 'Cause
Right.
now it's a comfortability thing. It's like, oh well, now they'll start talking to your spouse or something. Like, I mean, I'd be damned if your mother or any of your parents called me on the phone. Like, that wouldn't be a good thing. But I think, the reason why that's not the case because the boundary's there.
Right.
So I definitely think you shouldn't really tell your parents everything or even your siblings everything about your relationship because it gives them room to feel very comfortable with inserting themselves into your relationship, and that's not okay.
Definitely. I think that is a risk that you take by sometimes being too attached to your parents when you're in a relationship, because your relationship has to be separate from the relationship with your parents. If it all starts to feel merged together, then that's where you run into the issue of, like you said, the parent just feeling very comfortable inserting themselves into every situation where they're calling your spouse and telling them what they think. And
I think that's wrong.
Well, not only is it not necessarily wrong, but it's not okay because there's not a boundary.
Right.
There has to be a boundary.
Right.
I'm not your mother's son.
That's true.
That's my mother-in-law. So there has to be a boundary there where unless we build that type of rapport, there has to be a boundary.
Yes.
You can't call me telling me things that you want me to do.
Right.
It doesn't work
now,
that way.
I think it's okay if you confide, and maybe if a parent is coming from a concerned place, eventually, like, hey, I noticed that you guys have been arguing a lot, and I don't want to overstep, but maybe I can give a suggestion.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't think it should ever be a telling, especially we're grown. Like, no one should be telling us what to do at all.
Right.
Period. Like,
Yeah.
and honestly, I think it's something to say to explore if you feel like in your relationship you have to get someone else to tell your spouse something.
No, facts.
Now, you might want to explore why that is, you know what I mean? Or you might want to explore, why do I feel so much more comfortable? Why do I feel so comfortable, still, telling my mom these things about my relationship and her having to come to it. So I think that's like probably something to explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to talk about, but I think we touched on it in the beginning. A lot of it has to do with the years of doing it, right? If you've done something for so long, it almost just feels just so comfortable to do that you don't even think twice about it.
That's true, because I guess some
especially
people
for
are
like
really,
only
really,
children.
and I think some people are really, really close to their parents, and they just talk to their parents about everything, and I think that's a great thing. But I think that is something to say when you do decide to become married and insert someone else into your life, or insert yourself into someone else's life. You have to be mindful of that person too,
Okay.
and the relationship with your mother or your father cannot be more, important than the relationship with your spouse.
Yes. So I think if one word sums up the relationship between in-laws and your spouse is boundaries.
Definitely boundaries.
Boundaries have to be set. They have to be set. But thank you guys again for joining us for another episode of Let's Talk.
Yes.
We will be doing our weekly lives, our every other week lives, our lives on Monday. So join us for the live on in-laws. Can't wait to see you guys. And special shout out to everyone that has purchased Let's Talk merchandise. You guys have been great in just supporting us with the merchandise and making orders. And we appreciate each and every one of you guys. Definitely plan to drop some more merch soon. We want to do t-shirts, so be looking out for those. And see you guys next week.
Bye.